All right, welcome to part 2 of LED Live. This is Love is What? And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about love, we're talking about sexuality. And in part 2, we're gonna be talking a little bit about pornography. We're gonna talk about some statistics on where society is changing morally, on various relationship views. Make sure you check out part 1 if you haven't seen part 2, because it's kind of foundational and you want to build with us on what we talked about in part 1. And buckle your seatbelts because we're about to go for a fast-paced ride. This is Love is What? LED Live. Check it out.
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
So, movies, TV, magazines, what about social media though? With social media, you find that there is increased pressure of PDA. So what's PDA? Public display of affection. When you see what everyone else is doing, the pressure is up to keep up that image because you're competing with the Joneses. Everybody on the internet is now the Joneses.
Now, once again, just like the cover of Cosmopolitan, right? There was 900 photos taken to get that one photo for that girl, right? If you look at how much most people post to get that photo, you know, maybe they've taken tons of photos or whatever to get to that one. So a lot of times it's a very contrived view of what's going on as well.
Yeah, I guess we should probably do another shameless plug here. We have a documentary on social media that talks about some of this in more detail. It's called #selfie, and we'll also put that link in below.
I was thinking about scenes of that movie when you brought this up.
So are you guys talking about PDA in general or how it's presented nowadays? Because I think there's a place for it.
For sure.
Remember in Gender Babylon, check that out. It's one of our LED Live episodes. You're talking about, you know, how you interact with your wife, or even how you touch your kids. It's important to do that so they understand what is appropriate touch versus inappropriate touch.
Yeah, so we're talking about with the advent of social media and people putting up all manner of pictures, there's a heightened awareness of what everybody else is doing, and therefore you now feel compelled that you must also show, you know, your public display of affection. And, you know, how far do you go? Because some people aren't really putting the brakes on. It also makes it easy to overestimate levels of intimacy. You don't know the whole story. You only know what you see on the screen.
Yeah.
That picture is a snapshot in time.
And
right?
we're all
That's
good
all
at, like, you know, putting on the smile just for the picture,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Yeah.
so.
You also compare yourself with others. You want to see what everybody else is doing. Aside from in-person flirting, social media is the most common way that teens express interest in someone they have a crush on.
And in
I
most
met my
cases, right? In most cases, this is actually how they only communicate. I mean, it's
Some
really
people-
interesting through social media. I mean, they're like literally Instagramming each other pictures of themselves, and that's how their relationship goes, you know?
I seen a recent TED Talk video where a lady was basically saying the internet, Facebook for example, is like the new little black book of the internet. And that some people are like, I should keep up this relationship with this person I know over here because what if things don't work out in this relationship over here? Even if you're in a married, long-term relationship, they're like still keeping somebody
Open door.
Yeah, open door because hey, what if things don't work out? What am I gonna do?
And for a female, really, communication is the real relationship, right? I mean, that's the intimacy, is that communication. The sex is really a side note to that relationship. And so, you know, you gotta be careful with that because even as a female, you're keeping these relationships alive with all these other people, and that's getting fed, and that's what they're really after. So, I mean, there's caution here to you know, guard your marriage, guard that relationship.
That's what my wife is always telling me. She says, you don't talk enough. Talk to me more. Come home. How was your day? It's fine. And
Terrible.
So she adjusts the question. She's gotten wise. You know, tell me about your day, right? Yeah, I'm just not a big talker. You know, I do these things and I go and present, and it's sometimes people get the idea that I'm just, you know, talk. And it's really not me. I'm more of a quiet, reserved person. But you're right. Females desire that communication. They want you to talk to them. They want you to communicate, and that's a foundational principle in your marriage. If you're not communicating,
But how do you guys feel, when you finally get it off your chest, when you finally have a conversation?
Oh,
Is it nice?
I'm a chatty catty man. My wife's got to tell me to stay quiet.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said too much.
Technology can make teens feel more connected and closer to their partner. It can also cause feelings of jealousy and uncertainty in the realm of social media. The problem with all this technology is when you're communicating, there can oftentimes be a lot of ambiguity. One of the ways that we now use to express ourselves, because it works a little bit better, is emojis, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't see emotion on the other end of a device. You don't always just see that. And two people, they can read the same thing and take it completely
Yes.
differently depending on their personality.
That's why I use all caps.
Yeah.
This guy's just yelling at everybody.
Exclamation mark,
It's like, I thought you were mad at me.
That's just
No.
what I thought.
I was just saying it loudly. I'm going to go through a number of statistics here from different sources like Pew Research, which is what this one comes from. It says, the leading reasons why teenagers in the US feel that social media has a mostly negative effect on people their own age, and this is as of 2018 in April, so a little over a year ago. Number one reason, bullying and rumor spreading.
My niece was bullied through social media. She was new in high school, and they somehow either reposted some pictures or whatever, and it really bothered her pretty bad. She almost wanted to change schools.
Wow.
So I know this is her firsthand experience through my family.
I think what's really interesting on here is you would think that people would just be tired of the drama. But it's only at 3%. There's all these other issues that they're self-identifying and saying, no, it's bully rumoring, it's harmful for the relationship, it's unrealistic views of others' lives. Well, let's take a look at what Barna Group said. They had an article on their site called Porn 2.0, the Sexting Crisis. Very provocative title, right? Porn 2.0 offers much of the same promise as traditional pornography, a disembodied visual experience without the attachments or intimacy of sex. And yet there is a variety here as well, because the truth is, sexting often happens well before a relationship begins, in those early get-to-know-you stages. And it's not all unlikely that a person is sexting with multiple potential partners at any one time. If he's asking you for pictures, he's probably asking someone else for pictures too.
Good point.
Right? Simple,
This has
but it makes sense.
changed the paradigm, because when we were growing up, to get a picture, you had to take a picture, take it to get it developed, this stuff. Now you literally could, in a moment of whatever, excitement, take a picture of yourself and hit send and oh, I can't believe what I just did. Now it's out there to be passed around, wow.
And if it's ever used against you, which I'm sure happens a lot, it can destroy people's lives. And I mean, think of the stress of being a teen already, and then all of a sudden now you have this public life where everybody has a phone. It can easily be texted to everyone real fast. It's a terrible, terrible thing.
There are apps on the App Store that are private photo vaults, right?
Yeah.
The icon looks like something else.
The calculator app.
Yeah, it looks like the calculator app or whatever, and you have to use a password to get into it, right? Or your thumb, for Touch ID or whatever, because people are trying to hide things like that. They don't want anybody else to see, if mom gets your phone and opens it up, what pictures have you been taking, Wow. It's a way that you can hide, what's going on in your life.
This
It's
meme about
crazy.
80s babies. You're like, man, I'm so happy I'm an 80s baby. I was able to do all my stupidity before social media.
Yeah,
Live your
really.
life, be free and make your mistakes, and not have everyone else watch it.
Yeah, not have it broadcast everywhere. Well, the same report went on and it said Porn 2.0 is user-created, often shared with a known person, a friend or significant other, or a potential romantic interest. You know what I'm talking about. Sexting, Snapchatting, nude pictures, posting provocative Instagram photos. This is amazing what's going on these days. We know that in 2018, teen smartphone use is at 91%. As compared to 2011, it was only 36%. We've talked about it being a source of influence, a source of information, right? And now it's nearly omnipresent. I mean, just whatever you want, whenever you want. So, 2017, New York Times did a study. and it shows that teens and adults check their smartphones at least 150 times per day.
Oh.
And text at least 110 times per day. This does not even include Instagram, Snapchat, and other texting options.
Just the text itself.
It's so prevalent in society. It's so accessible, so easy, really, to do good or evil, right? Because technology is a tool. You can use it to do good, you can use it to do evil. But it's made it so easy to do some of those things that we shouldn't be doing.
Ghost vibes?
Ghost vibes?
Or people like don't even have their phone in their pocket.
Oh, yeah.
They're like they feel it and there's nothing there.
All
They're
the time.
feeling the vibration.
Like your hip.
They're used to like that text feeling, so they're getting it even when it's not
Oh
happening.
yeah, it totally happens to me.
Yeah, I've had it happen to me too, yeah.
In 2011, 1% of kids 8 years and under had tablets. In 2017, 42% do.
Wow.
That's a lot of tablets just being handed out to kids.
I would like to compare bedrooms,
Yeah.
kids in even the early 90s versus early
Seriously.
2000s.
And you got to be really careful with a device that's connected to the internet. You know, I mean, even through kids apps, I have heard that some of them have chat rooms, and adults can get on those kids apps and start communicating with the kids. It's really alarming. So, as a parent, you really need to be cautious with giving your kid an open-ended device like that. Suggestion: if they're going to play with it in an open room, back in the bedroom with closed doors. Not a good idea.
Just turn the internet off of it. Let them play their little games or whatever.
Yeah.
Download the videos that you want on there.
That's right. Disconnect it from the internet.
Exactly. And so just a great segue for that is our next statistic, where it says 50% of teens aged 13 to 19 or 18 frequently communicate online with someone they've never met in person.
Wow.
50%.
50%.
That's scary.
A lot of strangers out there. There's a lot of strangers and strange ideas and people doing weird things.
Yeah, you really want to have a sleepless night, start watching those Dateline things of those child molesters that get online, man. You'll never sleep again
How
if
to
you
Catch
got
a
kids.
Predator. And in the selfie documentary, the guy who pretended to be I don't even remember. He got a 13-year-old girl to meet him though.
You got 12, 13, and 14-year-old girl to meet him. Yeah. I mean, it happens at all ages. It's so easy to deceive people on the internet because really on the other side, they really have no idea who is there or anything about you. You can put a persona out and it's so easy. So really disturbing along with that is that 1 in 5 children will be approached by a sexual predator online.
1 in 5.
1 in 5, 20%.
And that's just online, not counting real world sexual predators.
Right, and the danger really becomes is when this crosses into that reality. Not that this isn't a danger, but even more a danger, and then you could have a child kidnapped or assaulted or what have you. It gets really scary. When it comes to online presence and technology and kids and all that, oftentimes, when we talk to parents and do seminars and stuff, they almost have like this, what do we do? Almost like the parents are helpless. Like, remember, you're the parent.
Exactly.
Right? It's still your home, it's still your devices. You have to make the rules, what it is that you want your kid to do and not to do. And I realize from talking to a lot of moms, for example, they say, we don't know the technology that well, and we don't know what to do. And so that's one thing that I have a passion to do that hopefully we can work toward in the future is showing them some of those tools on what can I do as a parent? What are those settings I need to set? What does it mean when I put a firewall on my router, or whitelist websites versus blacklist websites, or terms or whatever? Parents need to be educated about those kinds of things. Otherwise, you're just kind of it's open season on your kid. More than 58% of children surveyed ages 14 to 17 report having seen a pornographic site on the internet or on their phone. All it takes is a kid that it's been exposed and they know how to spell, and they get their parents' phone, and game over there. They want to share. Sin is very contagious, if you will. It wants to spread everywhere like a disease.
You made a comment about flip phones. You guys grew up with flip phones even before that time?
I wouldn't say grew up.
Oh. Yeah. Well, even before all that.
I was about 20 when I got my first flip phone.
You were still exposed to this stuff without the technology we have today.
Yeah.
for parents, I think they need to talk about it with their kids before their kids are exposed to it.
Yeah.
I think knowledge is everything. So if the kid understands that, I think when they're confronted with it, it won't be, their response won't be curiosity.
Yep.
I think it'll be like, whoa, I shouldn't watch this, and turn to something else, hopefully.
Yep. They actually say, I watched a really amazing presentation on this exact topic. When do you talk about this with your kids? How do you begin to open this up? And the lady was basically saying, you want to beat your kid to the punch. Mm-hmm. You want to give them, because they're going to be naturally curious. My kids have already come, my daughter actually has already come to my wife and started questioning her about sexuality. She's 9 years old. And it really gave my wife an opportunity to take a step back, talk to her about the amazing gift that God created us to have together, and showed it in its proper light before some other kid educated her. And now she has a proper context that came from her mother, and she understands now the context of it. So now when she's introduced to it from a little kid at school, or somebody comes and says something, she goes, no, I know that's not right, this is right. Yeah. And that's part of the problem, is parents that don't say anything to their kids, and then all of a sudden some other kid's gonna tell your kid. I mean, that you pretty much can't control.
Or they just hide it like it's taboo, which makes the kid even more curious. Well, I'm gonna find out one way or another, and then they're only gonna see that negative light.
We've gotta start having these conversations with our kids, and the reality of the situation is by age 10, 11, 12, 13, oftentimes it's too late.
Yep.
And it's the kind of education as well. I mean, you don't want to scare the kid. You also don't want to leave it open-ended, because predators look out for scared children, vulnerable children.
That's
so having a child having understanding and also being confident in, okay, if this is the situation I'm faced with, this is how I should react, this is how I can get out of it, it's really important.
And this is another thing that happens when you put it in the proper context as well, that the child feels safe to come and talk with you about that conversation. If they were exposed to a dirty magazine or a video or something, they immediately, I mean, every kid knows this is wrong. Like, I should not be seeing this. And then it's a real, it's a real, like, fearful thing. I don't want to talk with my parent about it because I've seen something that I know I shouldn't have seen. And so that topic then becomes in the shadows, and that's where the devil can really get a hold of their mind and grow that sin, is when this stuff is not able to be brought out into the light. So you want to keep those clear communications as a parent, keep that communication, be able to feel like a safe place for your child to come and have those conversations with your parent.
Or even in shows, like, who's training your kids? It's not cool in shows to go and talk to your parent. Mm-hmm. You know, it's cooler to go talk to your friend, or even just go and experience it yourself.
Right.
So even in that context.
Or Google it.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
A helpful resource for parents, the book by a man named Andy Crouch. It's called The Tech-Wise Family. We'll see if we can put that link to Amazon below. It's a good read that will help you see some principles on how to guide your children through this whole technology situation. Wow. From that same report we just mentioned previously, 37% of these kids have received a link to sexually explicit content. 15 to 24-year-olds account for nearly half of all STD diagnoses each year.
Wow.
Wow, that's a pretty, young demographic, especially when you're talking to those 15, 16, 17. Once you hit 18, obviously you are considered to be legally adult. You're able to make your own decisions.
But you also think about the experience, like at that young age, you have to expose yourself in a lot of situations to develop an STD, or you don't have to, but man, it's just showing like kids are really sexually active at that age, Probably didn't happen the first time.
To be sexually active at that age, prior to being that age, they're being primed with information, right? They're being fed information to make them curious, and to the point where they get like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Mm-hmm. The biggest online users of pornography are 12 to 17-year-old boys.
Whoa.
Wow.
That one was kind of a bit of a surprise to me, to think that it was that young of an age group.
And you know what scares me about that is the warped picture that a young boy is growing up and having of a woman. If his wife doesn't do that, or his mate doesn't perform in this certain way, I mean, he's sealing into his mind what excites him. Our brains take pictures, especially the male mind takes pictures in the brain and then tries to recreate those activities. And so those young kids that are being exposed to this are trying to recreate that, and that's not realistic. Most women are not going to do the things that those women are doing in those videos. And it's literally warping their mind to no end. And you can see why now all of a sudden it's like their idea of a woman is just what pleasure can she give me, which is a very selfish, lustful view of women. And rather than him going, what can I do for my wife? That would be a proper context. But.
And how easily accessible do these things have to be for a 12-year-old to get their hands on it? 12-year-olds don't have credit cards, or if they take their parents, I'm hoping that the parents would see the bill on it. But it's easy to just get to access.
There's so much free pornography on the internet.
Yeah.
There literally does not need to be any sort of financial exchange. These kids are being exposed to an incredible amount of terrible things. And this is a warning call to parents. You got to know what your kids are doing. Know what those devices are. Put the safeguards in there, because this is the statistics in the world that is telling us what the majority of people are struggling with right here.
These creators are like drug dealers. They're able to put things out that's like, this is your first hit. The first hit's free. Get you hooked. And then once they have that exposure, then they're going to be seeking after it, trying to. Yeah. Then they're willing to pay for it.
It is true. There's a reason why it's a billion-dollar industry.
Right. Yeah.
So how much of the internet consists of pornography? 4% of websites, 13% of web searches, and 20% of mobile searches. Why do you think it's so much higher on mobile?
More secret, personal.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
Sure.
And percentage of the U.S. adults 18 to 35 who watch porn at least weekly, 87% of men and 28.5% of women. I'm going to be throwing quite a few statistics at you guys just kind of rather rapidly now, so feel free to jump in, but we're going to kind of go through a chain of information about this topic. The world's most popular websites. So, what does come to everybody's mind, right? Google, right? Everybody knows Google.
And YouTube, yeah.
And then after that, YouTube, and everybody thinks of Facebook. But the thing that's really surprising to me is right here, and that's Pornhub. Pornhub is higher than Instagram. It's higher than Amazon. It's higher than Netflix. This is the #1 pornography website in the world.
Wow.
Higher than Netflix.
And it's like about number 8 on the list.
There's more people watching porn than there are regular shows on Netflix.
It's baffling because you think of the ones that are above it. The only one on the list that's above that really concentrates on video is YouTube. All the rest of them are either it's a search engine or it's just kind of social media, which is a variety of content. But most of those are informational. 60% of porn websites are hosted in the US. These are the top 10 countries for websites hosting pornography.
Wow.
And we are #1 by far. Shame on us.
I thought it would
Right.
be like Europe or someplace.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's actually
Right.
kind of surprising because there's other countries where porn or prostitution is legal. But that's one ironic thing, prostitution, as far as I know, is only legal in Vegas in the United States. So it's illegal to pay a woman for sex, but if she's on camera making a video getting paid, perfectly legal. Just ironic. I don't get the idea there.
So this comes from Psychology Today. What does porn do to intimacy? They said that #1, porn-free relationships are stronger with a lower rate of infidelity.
Amen.
Kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Of course.
just seems
But
like
all
I'm
you
not
see is
affected
your
by
wife.
what I watch.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. #2, watching porn diminishes relationship commitment. Really kind of goes along with point #1, right?
Yeah.
#3, the fantasy alternative leads to real world cheating.
I love it that this is Psychology Today. This is not
BibleThumper.com.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, this has nothing to do with the religion whatsoever. This is literally the psychologists of the world saying, hey, look, this is what this thing is doing to your brain and your relationship.
Exactly. Additionally, according to the Olmsted study, they indicated that only men think that watching pornography has only positive consequences.
What man is that? Slap him.
Dare I
on
ask
the
what
topic.
those positive consequences are?
He
It
gets
didn't
aroused.
list them.
You know, this is often attributed to a male problem, but I believe that they are starting to find statistics that say that this is just as much of a female problem in today's world as it is a male problem.
So we'll go back to this quote. These shifts in themes found in popular music may both influence cultural norms and shifts. And I think as we look at the influence of music, we look at the influence of media, we've looked at all these things, we can see how it's changing society, you know, in very real ways. Job said this in 31 verse 1. He says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? If you are sold out to God, if you say, God, I am yours, you have recreated me, you've changed me, there's no reason for me to look on another. There's no reason for me to lust after another woman. I have my spouse, I have you, it's enough. You know, there's a great enough gift in that to be realized without going outside of that. And according to psychology today, you know, you're going to reduce your commitment. You're going to see downsides that cascade.
This makes perfect sense, because if you make a commitment to God, loving God, it goes hand in hand with respect. When you look up to God and He transforms you, the next step would be looking towards your fellow men and how you interact with your fellow men. So what Job is saying makes a lot of sense. It's like a natural reaction or a natural next step to just loving God, is to respect your fellow man. And this is both for men and women.
And we're not, to be clear, we're not talking about you noticed a girl. As guys, you notice women all the time. You might see some girls, oh, she's attractive. We're talking about when you are dwelling on that, right, in a way that you are entertaining thoughts that you should not, that would be detrimental to your marriage and your relationship with God. All right, so get back to some more of these statistics. Just to go back to this quote that we found from that music article, you know, how is society changing? What are these shifts? What is happening? And when we look at statistics, I think what we can find is really fascinating. In this one, it asked the question, do you consider gambling morally acceptable or morally wrong? 69% of people said morally acceptable. And 28% of people said morally wrong, 1% said depends, and 2% had no opinion. Gambling, so according to people, pretty much okay. What about, do you think married men and women having an affair is morally acceptable or morally wrong? 10% said morally acceptable. 88% said morally wrong. I actually expected this to be lower, given some of the other things that we've seen. But it's interesting to me, people's answers versus people's behaviors versus what's portrayed. So we may have a mental assent, but what are we acting out on?
So we're still doing things that we know are wrong.
It could be. Do you think that pornography is morally acceptable or morally wrong? 43% said morally acceptable. That's a lot. And we're talking about 18 years and older, and this statistic is as late as 2018 in May. This is not as morally acceptable as gambling, for example, but still, there's a good chunk of people out there like, yeah, no problem.
That's shocking. Yeah, my mother and sister are porn stars. That's normal. That's acceptable.
Cheating on your spouse, very wrong. Pornography, not such a big deal.
Right.
We go back to the words of Jesus.
Lusting after a woman, you've committed adultery already with her in your heart.
So we really need to reevaluate our morality perhaps here. What about this? Do you think having a baby outside of marriage is morally acceptable or morally wrong? 65% of people said it was morally acceptable. 32% said normally wrong.
You know, I think this is actually morally wrong because it takes two to raise a child. Going back to our beginning conversation, the child needs to see a picture of a male and a female together to understand the context. And often when you have a child outside of wedlock, they're bounced around. The stepdad situation or the stepmom situation is never the same. And oftentimes, I mean, I've heard oftentimes especially with young girls. I mean, it's the stepdad that was raping them, and it's like, a terrible, terrible situation. So I wish society saw this as differently and saying, listen, a child would be best to have in a marriage context, not outside. The fact that the majority of people believe that that is okay is a little alarming.
Are people born gay or lesbian, or does this develop due to upbringing and environmental factors? This question was asked in the US, and you can see how people's attitudes have shifted over time. Once upon a time, back in the 70s, people would have said it has to do with upbringing and environment, but over time we can see how that has changed.
But look at the music. I was born this way. Look at the influence of the culture.
Exactly.
I was born in this, I think that has an effect.
It's interesting to look at these statistics and look at correlations in things like music and things like media and see, can we really say it's not affected us? But when we look at how society has changed over time, what are their values? What do they say is morally wrong and right? This is what we've said when we're polled as Americans. Are gay or lesbian relationships morally acceptable? You can see the same kind of trend. It goes back to that comment you made. There are TV shows that they'll just put a character in. They don't have to say anything. It's just a nice neighbor. It just shows us how our attitudes have shifted on what people consider to be morally acceptable or not as a society. Why are you in favor of same-sex marriage? When you look at why people are in favor of these things, it's interesting what they have to say. Equal rights, everyone should have the same rights and freedoms. That's what 32, almost a third of participants said. About the same amount said personal choice, love, happiness matters, not sexual orientation. And then they have a host of other reasons. Interesting, they did actually bring God into this as an answer. And 5% of people said everyone is equal in God's eyes. And that's why they were in favor of same-sex marriage. Does religion do more harm than good? Let's talk about that, along with all these other things. People are asked, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Religion does more harm in the world than good. 49% of people would say that religion does more harm than good.
Wow.
And depending on where you're at in the world, it's higher, like Belgium and Germany, Spain, Sweden, Great Britain, all higher. The United States is on the lower end, of this graph. 39%, Japan being the lowest of the countries that are listed.
Which I do find that interesting, 39%. When you really look at the statistics, how many people in America believe in God, it's still more people believe in God than don't. But the media will have you think, atheist mindset, that's what's normal now.
And yet almost 4 in 10 people say that it does more harm than good.
Well, let's keep in mind, we're talking about religion across the board, not just Christianity. There are very oppressive religions out there.
Oh, yeah.
So I understand the statistic, why it's like that.
Let's take a look at the next one. Religion's generational decline in the U.S. This is a percentage of Americans who say they believe in God, pray daily, or attended services once a week. So you have the silent generation. This is from 1928 to 1945. Your baby boomers, Gen X, older millennials, and younger millennials. And if you look, what do you see? In every single category, pretty much consistently, with the exception of attending services once a week, which is pretty close to the same, but a slight rise, pretty much a steady decline. And it's interesting how this, when we see a steady decline, and then we also see over time our attitudes towards morals and values and things like that.
Yeah, they go hand in hand.
Are you certain or uncertain about the existence of a God? 54% said absolutely certain there is a God. 16% not sure. 9% certain there is no God.
They know everything.
And then you got some people that in the valley of decision, they're somewhat certain there's a God, somewhat certain there is no God. Only about half of teenagers are in this, category where they're like, there is a God.
I'd like to talk to that 9% and see what their hard proof is for no God.
If we keep going, what do we see about cohabitation? It's a good idea when we look across generations. If you look at millennials, 72% think great idea. Gen Xers, 69%. Baby boomers, 63%. The elders, look at the huge drop there.
Right.
36%. They're like, no, that's not a good idea. But pretty much after that, it's a steady climb.
So is that the class of people that are like, having their 50th wedding anniversaries and stuff right now, or is that baby boomers?
No, the elders.
that's elders.
No, that's going to be the class.
Okay.
They're like having those 50-year, anniversaries. And you can see also when people identified as liberal versus conservative, what they thought was a good idea or not. If they were liberal, 86% said, yeah, it's a great idea.
That's because they're probably mostly doing it.
And only 37% said, we don't think that's a good idea. What about when we look at this cohabitation, if it's a good idea? Practicing Christian versus people of no faith. 41% of Christians said, we think cohabitation's a good idea. You take God out of the equation, and people's attitudes towards morality changes.
Yeah, so true.
This is views on traditional Christian sexual ethics, part 2. This is also from Barna Group. And we can look at practicing Christians, no faith, and other faith. This is the idea that traditional Christian sexual ethics teaches that sex should only be within a marriage between a man and a woman. Which of the following words, if any, best describes your opinion of those ethics? So 53% of practicing Christians said that was a moral idea. 36% of people with no faith said it was unrealistic. Other faiths, 28% of them said a moral idea. But you can look at this and see how attitudes change depending on what column you fall in. This is the percentage of high school students in the US who had smoked cigarettes in their lifetime in 2015 to 2017 by gender and sexual orientation. Okay, what do you see?
See that the more they stray away from heterosexual, the more risky maybe they are.
The next one is, these are the same group of people who had drunk alcohol and by gender and sexual orientation. What do you see?
Same thing.
It's more leveled out.
Yeah, more leveled out, but basically, it's still higher.
Right.
Yeah, you could
Right?
still deduct that a heterosexual group actually has a little bit probably less of a risk take,
And then you look at the next one, and this is cocaine use, same group. And now what do you see?
They may also be less stressed,
I was looking over the statistics and wondering, like, wow, it's like
Yeah.
cigarettes, alcohol, cocaine.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all basically the same kind of trend. What is going on here? And I've often wondered, these other groups, are they depressed? Are they, feeling some kind of societal pressure that brings on the depression? What's going on that you would have a more high incidence of those abuses versus heterosexual? This was in 2006, and these are going to talk about a group of people called busters. Busters are people who are born between 1965 and 1983, okay? So if you fall into that category, you're a buster. But many busters also defy sexual convention in their attitudes. For instance, more than 2/3 of the generation said that cohabitation and sexual fantasies are morally acceptable behaviors, compared with half of older adults. Most young adults contended that engaging in sex outside of marriage and viewing pornography are not morally problematic, while only 1/3 of pre-busters agreed. Almost half of busters believed that sexual relationships between people of the same sex are acceptable, compared with 1/4 of older adults. People's attitudes are changing over time.
Was there a stat on each group's happiness and mental state and things like that?
No, I didn't have that in the article.
Oh, okay. That would be cool to see.
They also said teens and young adults said not recycling is more immoral than viewing pornographic images.
Whoa.
I was just like, wow.
I mean, I'm totally against littering. Oh, this is recycling.
Yeah, recycling.
Whoa.
Like that, yeah. That.
So
wow.
you better be driving an electric car and,
Man.
recycling your plastic
I'm
and
gonna put that aluminum can
all
in the
that.
trash can, but hey, you wanna watch this porn with me?
yeah.
It really puts into perspective the worth of human life as opposed to other things.
I mean,
Value of sexuality.
if you actually just analyze the people that go through the sex industry, their lives are ruined. They actually even have a you know how you get a motorcycle and they tell you you've got 7 years to live when you get this motorcycle license? The same thing applies in the porn industry. They'll actually tell the women they have a shelf life, and that shelf life is really short and fast. That's why when they're in 18, by the time they're 25, a lot of them are just messed up. I don't know what the actual statistic is, but I find that interesting that we care less about their lives than we do some plastic.
Same report. No, I'm sorry, different report, but also from the Barna Group. Some of these differences show up in sexual activities engaged in during the past month. But busters were twice as likely to have viewed sexually explicit movies or videos, 2.5 times more likely to report having a sexual encounter outside of marriage, and 3 times more likely to have viewed sexually graphic content online. Depending on what generation you're in, you are, I guess, bending the rules of sexuality, bending morality to, your own generational viewpoints. People are changing over time. Go back to Statista. How would you rate the state of moral values in the United States today? Excellent, good, only, fair, or poor? Look how many people said poor. Given all that the information that we've covered, at this point in time, we have almost 50% of people would say our moralities are poor.
They're telling the truth.
They are. They're being honest with themselves.
And they're actually sensitive to the reality of it.
And sensitive to the reality. Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that we have a lot of similarities with Rome. And just before Rome fell, there was a direct link with the sexual twistedness in that society. And it's like now all of a sudden we are cruising down that same pathway. We have a lot of twisted sexual understandings and things in our world. And we're headed down the same path. They fell.
From Pew Research Center, this one shows us that attitude towards the change in moral values over the past 50 years in the U.S. by generation. Changing for the better. Guess who was the highest group that said we're changing for the better? It was the millennials, and it just goes down from there. And of course, conversely, changing for the worse, the silent generation, that older generation, baby boomers right behind them. Beliefs about morality by generation, again from the Barna Group. What is morally right and wrong changes over time based on society.
So there's no set moral law, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's in flux.
It just changes with society.
Yeah, it's fluid, ethically fluid.
That's scary.
It is, because what's right yesterday may not be right tomorrow.
To bring up Rome, throw them in the Colosseum. Let's watch. Let's have a party and celebrate.
Bread and circus, sex and violence. That's what Rome struggled with.
Wow.
This one was really staggering to me. Really staggering. Barna Group reported this in an article that said Christians say they do best at relationships, worst in Bible knowledge.
Wow.
Really sad. And here's my question is, how can you confidently say that you do best in relationships if you're least in Bible knowledge?
Because the entire Bible is about relationships. And the entire 10 Commandments is your relationships. It's your relationship with God, your relationship with man.
So if you don't know what the Bible teaches about relationships, you can say, I'm great at relationships, because you're not comparing with the Bible.
And the Bible is a book full of people's examples of what happened in their relationship. And they're not always positive stories. Yeah. But what we can do is we can look at those stories and we can say, look how that turned out. Maybe you should stay away from the way that guy dealt with it, If you have 700 wives, might lead you a little bit astray,
If I can boil a lot of this down into more or less more, succinct thought or one thought, relationships anymore are becoming less and less about loving others. And they're becoming more about loving yourself, or making sure that number one is taken care of. We get this idea that love is selfish. Love is about me. It's about what I want, right? It's about personal satisfaction, and that has become the highest priority. The Bible says in Psalm 101, 3 and 4, it says, I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. A perverse heart shall depart from me. I will not know wickedness. If we don't know what the Bible says about relationships, how could we ever expect to be good? How could we ever expect to know what we would put in front of our eyes or not? We'd have nothing to measure it by. And if you have nothing to measure it by, you're back to ethically fluid.
Yeah.
It just goes without saying. What's right yesterday may not be right tomorrow because you have no ruler, no guide. The Bible also says, turn away my eyes from looking at worthless things and revive me in your way. This is a prayer that all of us should have because it's so easy to fall into that trap of looking at things that are worthless, looking at things that can waste your time, looking at things that will drag you down. And if you're a parent, some of the best advice I've heard, you need to teach your kids that if they stumble onto something that it becomes apparent they should not be looking at, do not freak out on your kid. Just make it clear to them like, hey, if you ever see something that you come across you shouldn't look at, you have little brothers and sisters, make sure you take them out of the room, come get me, and I'll take care of it. That's what we need to be doing with our kids. There are all kinds of tools that people can use to help guard their eyes. I'll mention one of them. One of them is called Covenant Eyes. Have you heard of Covenant Eyes? Mm-hmm. Okay, Covenant Eyes is a computer program. It gets installed, and it can be put, I think now, on smartphone devices as well. And it will send a log of everything that you look at to somebody of your choice, an accountability partner. If you are tempted to look at something that you shouldn't, and you go down that road, somebody is looking, right? Besides just God Almighty, who is always looking. And probably also in the back of your head is if you know somebody can rat you out, you're probably going to think twice about whether you do that. And you might be doing the right thing for not entirely the right reason, but it's a good deterrent.
But sometimes we need that kind of strong measure to be able to get rid of something like this. I mean, God created sexuality to be a bonding glue to us, and He created it as a very strong substance. And so when we misglue that to something, it takes drastic measures like that sometimes to get out of that. And of course, using the tool of embarrassment is probably a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Some more Bible advice, 2 Timothy 2:22, it says, flee also youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart.
I love that instruction because the Bible isn't just saying don't do this, don't do that, but when you relinquish these things, fill it with this, fill that hole.
If you find yourself in that situation where it's like, you know what, I know my heart isn't right. I know I've done things that I should not. I am struggling right now. This is a very good prayer that you can pray, I think. It's from Psalm 139, 23 and 24. It says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Give God that permission to come in and clean house. He doesn't care how dirty it is because He's seen it all. I don't care how bad you think your life is, God has seen worse. The Bible says, where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. There's a lot of confusion in our world these days.
And just to tie that in sexually, envy and self-seeking, which is the very definition of lust, then every evil thing can happen. So the devil knows, listen, our sexuality is intertwined with our spirituality. If the devil can mess up your sexuality, he can mess up your spirituality.
Yep.
And so this is a telltale verse right here that really lets us know, guard well those avenues to the soul, because this is one of the avenues that the devil is certainly using to get at us. All right, well, that is all we have today. For love is what? Being the question as I went through all this information, I was like, wow, what has love become? Love is what? Maybe there's a follow-up presentation we'll do sometime. I have a second part to this that focuses more on the spiritual aspect called What is Love? But for now, it's Love is What? This has been an LED Live episode talking about sexuality and all the things going on in our world and where morality is going, where society is going, how people's attitudes are shifting, and why you should be careful as a parent. You guys have any final thoughts that you want to share with our viewers?
I just like how you showed clear evidence that media does affect society. We can see it warping and shifting and being molded by media at large,
There's one more thing I want to add. for parents, I'd really encourage you to not lose hope. Don't lose heart, because with all these influences of the devil that are surrounding us and children, God is in charge. He's in control.
That's right.
So I encourage you to do your best and just remember that God will do the rest. And with much prayer comes much power. So
Amen.
keep heart.
Good point, man.
Raise up a child in the way they should go. When he's older, he will not depart from it.
I was just thinking that.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to really encourage the viewers out here. You know, you guys have just seen one presentation. We did some research for this. Keith did a wonderful job looking at all these statistics, making sense of this. You guys, if you have small children, you guys have relationships, look this subject up. If you're looking for a way to approach your own children, do some research yourself. Trust me, this is one of the greatest gifts that God gave us, to have this beautiful thing in our relationships that we share together. And the devil is just wreaking havoc on these things, and he's literally kicking people out of churches because of this topic. So if you guys want to look more into this, we want to encourage you guys, do some research, subscribe to our channel, and we got lots of topics on this kind of thing. If you want to see what the media does and how it affects you, look at some of our other LEDs in our channel. And we thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. God bless.
Take care.